Well, good morning. Our worship service this morning, whenever Pastor Gary was speaking, was hard for me. I did not sleep very well last night, and he kept talking about rest. And as he talked about rest, I kept feeling the need to rest. Boy, oh boy. But I was taking notes the entire time, so I think I only blipped out for about 15 seconds. So, um, but yeah, it was just a different night with that. So we'll see how it goes this morning. Today, we're going to continue with Saul. We're in week 6, and last week we were in People of Purity, and we'll finish up with that hopefully this morning, and then move into God's visible presence. So let's go ahead and open up with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you for the worship hour this morning. Just thank you for the opportunity to learn about the various types of rest that you have. And Lord, we just pray that people will ultimately find that rest of salvation in you, in realizing that it's grace through faith and the need for it, and that there would be a strong desire for more and more people to come to know you. Dear Lord, just be with us as we talk more about Saul, and just help us help us to see the things you'd have to see now. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So last week we were getting into Saul and looking at was he a leader of people, and being the purity of people, and following along with what some of the examples in Numbers had talked about. And we had left off with 1 Samuel 19, where Saul had prophesied, and we saw that he had lost his clothes. And then the next piece that I want to take a look at this morning is in 1 Samuel 22. So if you would go there, let's go ahead and take a look at this passage. And just continue to look at... we see some high points with Saul and some low points, and whether he was we see what Saul's life was like, but was he leading the people in a way that they should be? So there are some pieces that come about in this passage. We see some evil in it without a doubt, but there are some other parts that we can see where the people were following God as they needed to, or at least in action. So let's see what we have. All right, the beginning of chapter 2. So it says, So David departed from there, and he escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's household heard of it, they went down there to him. Everyone who is in distress, and everyone who is in debt, and everyone who is disconnected gathered to him, and he became captain over them. Now there were about 400 men with him. If you remember earlier, when we talked about the army and building up an army, David was part of Saul's military, but that is not the case now, as Saul has turned on him. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, Please let my father and my mother come and stay with you until I know what God will do for me. And then he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. And the prophet Gad said to David, Do not stay in the stronghold. Depart and go into the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. And then Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered. Now Saul was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing around him. And Saul said to his servants who stood around him, Hear now, O Benjamites, will the son of Jesse also give to all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? For all of you have conspired against me, so that there is no one who discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you who is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in ambush, as it is to this day. So are these people following Saul at this point? These people that are supposed to be under him. Are they? Talk to me. Are they doing what he wants? No, absolutely not. They're not doing what he wants. He wants to know where David is, and the people have kept from letting him hear what's going on.
It doesn't even
So
have his son, is it?
his son isn't even. Yeah, his son's not
His
even
son
on the
doesn't
side.
sign an agreement with
Yeah. So why is this? Why have the people done this to Saul? Any ideas?
I'm going to realize that God has chosen David.
Okay.
I don't know if I have, but I'm just.
So David has been anointed at this point, but I don't believe at this time that it's been fully authorized. He's been anointed to know that he's going to be the next in line,
I'm tired of Saul's leadership, I guess.
possibly.
We got seen that kind of stuff happen here in Iron.
Sure. Yes. It certainly doesn't seem like Saul is in the will of God with this. So the people seem not to be following him in this particular direction. Now, there could be a purity of the people with this too, in realizing this king is evil and we cannot go along with the king. Might be a stretch, but something to consider. Let's continue. It says, Then Doeg the Edomite, who was standing by the servants of Saul, said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. And then the king sent to someone to summon Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's household, and the priests who were in Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, Listen now, son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul then said to him, Why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he would rise up against me by lying in ambush, as it is to this day? And then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who among all your servants is as faithful as David? Even the king's son-in-law, who is captain over your guard, and is honored in your house. Did I just begin to inquire of God for him today? Far be it from me. Do not let the king impute anything to his servant, or to say any of the household of my father, for your servants know nothing at all of this affair. But the king said, You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's household. Wow, this doesn't sound very right. And then the king said to the guards who were attending him, Turn around and put the priest of the Lord to death, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and did not reveal it to me. But the servants of the king were not willing to put forth their hands to attack the priest of the Lord. So again, you see the people here, they know what is right. So they've been taught correctly, whether it came during the time of Samuel, whenever Samuel was leading, or it has somehow continued under the time of Saul. So even though we see Saul have these evil thoughts and these evil pieces, we see that the people continue to act correctly and say, we're not going to attack a priest. So somehow there is still this purity that is in the people. Now, I'm not saying it comes from Saul. We know where the purity comes from. But it's interesting that we see that it isn't where the entire land has turned against God. There are still many faithful people who won't go attack a priest. So, any thoughts there? Bob?
Yeah, I think Saul keeps mentioning David in the terms of he's laying an ambush for me. And David never did that. He was the one that was doing that. And I think it would probably seem very strange to the people too. Here was a great general for you. You know, he fought great wars and honored you. He never has done anything against Saul.
Right.
And that's a confusing thing to tell your men also.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be loyal to their king, I believe, in their hearts, but it's seeming like this is almost impossible. Now he's wanting to kill priests.
Right.
And for no basic reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so even though the people may not know that David is going to be the next king, there's still some type of understanding that we cannot go against this guy. But we have to go against our own king that we have, that God put in place. Darren?
I think they're seeing that he's kind of like a little mad.
Yeah.
Jealousy, and he's just I'm going to wipe everybody that's any hint of, not following me and helping David, and he's just, I think the people and the soldiers and the servants see that Saul's kind of losing his sense of, just reality
Yeah.
and what's good and right. And this pure rage of jealousy that's driving this.
Right.
The only thing I find he's saying, David, what David is doing, but what he is doing is the same thing. It's kind of projection, so to say. Always knows how the bad kid always says something bad about the kid he's picking on. He's saying, he keeps on beating on him. Actually, he's the one beating on the kid. He
Right.
says the kid's beating on me. And it sounds just like a child.
It does.
With the projection.
Yeah, just wants his way. Just come, let me know where he's at. Jared?
I think it seems like the people are just caught in the middle in the sense like they know Samuel anointed King Saul. Samuel anoints king, or to be king, David. But yet David is not willing to go against Saul. Saul's willing to go against David, so it creates the people of like, okay, I don't know what to do. David's even willing to obey the king who wants to kill him.
Right.
So if David was like, okay, I'm going to take over, I think the people would go with him and be like, okay, let's get rid of Saul. But because David's not willing to do that, the people are in this weird middle ground of what to do. And so you kind of see that come out in this, like,
Right.
with the priests.
Yeah, I agree. They're in this middle ground, but with being in that middle ground, they seem to have that part to realize this is wrong to go against David like that, and it's wrong to go against a priest.
Supposed to killing priests.
Yeah, right.
I think the answer, part of the answer is in verse 2. David said these three mighty men, and people have already seen these are the cream of the crop, including Uriah the Hittite. And well, if these guys are going with David, something's wrong with Saul.
Sure.
So we're not going to follow the order.
Good point. Let's continue. I'm going to start in 17. And so the king said to the guards who were attending him, turn around and put the priests of the Lord to death, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and did not reveal it to me. But the servants of the king were not willing to put forth their hands to attack the priests of the Lord. And then the king said to Doeg, you turn around and attack the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned around and attacked the priest. And he killed that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. And he struck Nob, the city of the priest, with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and infants, also oxen, donkeys, and sheep he struck with the edge of the sword. But one son of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abithiar, escaped and fled after David. And Abithiar told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. And then David said to Abithiar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have brought about the death of every person in your father's household. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life, for you are safe with me. So Doeg the Edomite is willing to go ahead and kill. So what makes him different than these other people who would not do it?
Well, wasn't he Saul's personal shepherd of his flock?
So he was going to follow Saul.
Really devoted servant of Saul.
Mm-hmm.
And I would guess, I would think it's just from his own selfish nature of, well, I'm going to back Saul because
Yeah.
I want to keep the power under Saul so I can keep my position.
Okay. Maybe this is the person to follow. All right.
He's not an Israelite, so
Yes.
he doesn't have the same.
Right. Yeah. With him being Edomite, he doesn't have to follow him, or he can look at Saul differently than what the people of Israel can look at him as. So,
Probably not above killing any Israel, really.
huh?
Being an Edomite, he's probably not above killing any Israelite, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Jared, did you want to add to it, or was it you're good to go there? Okay.
He's not an Israelite.
Yep.
So a question I have, if you've read anything about it, how is it that the 85 didn't rise up against the one?
It's a great question.
I've always wondered that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have an answer for you. I didn't see one.
Okay.
Now, if they are not to kill, but I don't know that that's necessarily in the code with the Levites on that. I'd have to go back and take a look at it. So, Dan?
It's just interesting.
reference, he says the prophets of the Lord, or I can't remember, the priest of the Lord. And then when he speaks to the Edomite, he just says, kill the priest.
Mhm.
And there does seem to be a huge respect for the position that God has put people in.
Yes.
Remember, David's response is, how can I lift my hand against the Lord's anointed?
Right.
If the Lord's gonna take him out, he's gonna have to do it.
Mhm.
But, Paul or Saul in this is always making excuses of why other people are responsible. And David's response is, man, I caused the death of these people.
Mhm.
And so there's some integrity in
Yes.
that, on David's part that we don't see in Saul.
Yeah, we totally see a difference right there with how David responds to how Saul did. And I believe you're going to see the same piece with that. If you take a look at chapter 23, look at verse 2. Actually, let's go ahead and read verse 1 with it. It says, So then they told David, saying, Behold, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are plundering the threshing floors. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go and attack the Philistines? And the Lord said to David, Go and attack the Philistines and deliver Keilah. So we look and see what David does right here. He knows that this is not good with these Philistines attacking, and he inquires of God and what to do. And if we go back and take a look at all of that, chapter 22 that we took a look at, nowhere in there do we see that Saul ever inquired of the Lord on what to do. He just did it. We see the people know how to act, but Saul is out there in a different world right now, and David still will inquire of God on what needs to be done. All right, I want to flip over to chapter 24 now. And so we see that David and Saul run into each other in this chapter, and there's a discussion that takes place. And I find the discussion very interesting in looking at where Saul is at and where David is at. So look at these verses with me. And so this is, I believe this is David speaking here in verse 12. He says, May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you. And as the proverb of the ancients say, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog, a single flea? The Lord, therefore, be judge and decide between you and me. And may he see and plead my cause and deliver me with your hand. And when David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, Is this your voice, my son David? And then Saul lifted up his voice and wept. So Saul still knows how to turn some heartstrings there and how to get David, how to try to manipulate David. Even though Saul is in the wrong, he says. And then he said to David, You are more righteous than I, for you have dealt well with me, while I have dealt wickedly with you. You have declared today that you have done good to me, that the Lord delivered me into your hand, and yet you did not kill me. So here is Saul, even his wickedness, he recognizes the righteousness of David. And so there's still something there with Saul that realizes the heart that David comes from, and how David has acted correctly with him. Saul still may want to kill him, but he realizes the kind of person David is. So we can see that wicked piece of him, but there's still something, Okay, verse 19. So he says, For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safely? May the Lord therefore reward you with good in return for what you have done to me this day. Look at that again. May the Lord therefore reward you with good in return for what you have done to me this day. He recognizes where this comes from. Now behold, I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hand. Let's go ahead and finish it. So now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants and after me, that you will not destroy my name for my father's household. And David swore to Saul. All right. So, here's this person, all kinds of, craziness, goes and has priests killed and has all this evil, but still recognizes that righteousness. So I just find that interesting, that's there, that he's not just a totally depraved heart. Any thoughts there? Jared?
Well, backing up to chapter 22, Saul's mindset, says in verse 13, why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me, in that you have given him bread, this, and sword, and have inquired of the God for him, so that he would rise up against me by lying in ambush, as it is this day. So in his mind, he's like, when David gets a chance, he's going to kill him. And then we get to that moment where David had the chance to do it, and then Saul's like, oh, okay, maybe I have this wrong. So he kind of gets that, David's not like me. Because if I was in that position, I would have done it.
Right. Yep. And he recognizes why David is not like him. All right.
I think there's part that Saul sees that David's a better man than he is.
Mm-hmm.
And that God has seen that too, and he's, in essence, got to give to the fact that it's the Lord is with David, not with him anymore.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to chapter 28 then. All right. So we see Saul seeking the medium here. And a key verse that I think to begin it is in verse 3. It says, now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had removed from the land those who were mediums and spiritists. So he can no longer go to Samuel for advice. He hasn't done that for a long time anyway, because Samuel has gone with David and realized that's where he needs to be at. But notice what Saul has done in the land. He knows that mediums and spiritists are not good, and they should not be practicing. So he has his own wickedness, but still within the people, there's a need for them not to be seeking these people out. Although he's going to go seek out a medium. So I guess they're still practicing underground, but the people know it's not supposed to happen. And we're going to see that as we go through the verses too. So when Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Look at that again. Saul inquired of the Lord, but the Lord didn't answer him. And then Saul said to his servants, seek for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servants said to him, behold, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. And then Saul disguised himself by putting on other clothes and went, and he and 2 men with him. And they came to the women by night, and he said, conjure up for me, please, and bring up for me whom I shall name to you. But the woman said to him, behold, you know what Saul has done. Interesting that she calls his name as he's there. Has he cut off those who are mediums and spiritists from the land? Why are you then laying a snare for my life to bring about my death? Saul vowed to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. So he invokes God's name, even though God did not answer him. Then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel for me. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman spoke to Saul, saying, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. And then the king said to her, don't be afraid, but what do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a divine being coming out of the earth. And he said to her, what is his form? And she said, an old man is coming up. He's wrapped with a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and did homage. And then Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? And Saul answered, I am greatly distressed, for the Philistines are waging war against me, and God has departed from me and no longer answers me, even through prophets or by dreams. And therefore I have called you, that you may make known to me what I should do. And Samuel said, why then do you ask me, since the Lord has departed from you, and he's become your adversary? And the Lord has done according as he spoke through me. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor, to David. As you did not obey the Lord, did not execute his fierce wrath on Amalek, so the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the land will also give over Israel along with you into the hands of the Philistines. Therefore, tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me. Which means what? He'll be dead. Indeed, the Lord will give over the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. All right. So why wouldn't God have answered this guy crying out to him? Want to throw anything out there? Jared?
I think he did answer him in the sense that this was God's answer, that he allowed the medium to bring up Samuel. Like that was God's answer because that's who told him in the first place what was going to happen. Almost like, I'm going to tell you again.
Okay.
This is all I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
And I mean, God had to allow that. You know, it wasn't like the medium had some special power that God didn't. I mean,
Right.
God's sovereign.
Right.
So that was God's answer.
Okay. All right. So Saul, you didn't get it the first time with Samuel. Let's hear it from Samuel again. Yes? All right. Any other ideas? All right. I do believe that's part of it right there. I think that God also knew what was in Saul's heart, and that he just wanted God to do what Saul wanted. And well, I'm not going to do that because you keep doing what you want anyway. So if you're going to do what you want, then it's not going to work like this. You know, you're going to have to go somewhere else to a spiritist and have it happen this way. Any other thoughts here?
It's just unique that God answered through a spiritist. That God has power over any circumstance.
Yes. Yeah.
And he can intervene even if it's his enemy, in essence. That he can use them for what his purposes are.
Okay.
To speak, you know, as Samuel speaking to Saul.
Right.
Give him some direction that your days are coming to an end. It's got to be comforting, though, that he's going to be, you and your sons will be with me, versus the other going to hell. I mean, I guess, with me, and if you can take it that way, I would think. That they're going to be with
Samuel, right.
in paradise at this point in time. So, you know, God's sovereign power is being revealed
Yeah.
in these circumstances.
All right. Well, let's take a look and see what happens after this. It would have been easy for Saul just to march off and say, well, I'm done. You know, I'm just taking off. But look at 20 through 25. So Saul immediately fell full length upon the ground and was very afraid because of the words of Samuel. Also, there was no strength in him, for he had not eaten food all day and night. And the woman came to Saul and saw that he was terrified and said to him, behold, your maidservant has obeyed you, and I have taken my life in my hand and have listened to your words which you have spoke to me. So now also please listen to the voice of your maidservant, and let me set a piece of bread before you, that you may eat and have strength when you go your way. But he refused and said, I will not eat. However, his servants together with a woman urged him, and he listened to them. So he arose from the ground and sat on the bed. And then the woman had a fattened calf in the house, And she quickly slaughtered it, and she took flour, kneaded it, baked unleavened bread from it, and she brought it before Saul and the servants, and they ate, and they arose and went away that night. So there's a comfort piece that we see happen right here with a woman and with taking care of Saul. It could, like I said, it could have been easy just to take off, but Saul allowed this as well, and to say, I do need this right now, and allowed this person to feed him one last time, which may be his last meal before he dies. So, all right. So with the purity, we also have the laws of the Nazarites that kind of fit into this just a bit as well. Let's go look at that in Numbers 6 real quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it does go with this purity piece in whether Saul has this or not. So chapter 6 in Numbers verses 1 through 6, and it says, "And again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when a man or woman makes a special vow, the vow of the Nazarite, to dedicate himself to the Lord, he shall abstain from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar, and whether made from wine or strong drink, nor shall he drink any grape juice or eat fresh or dried grapes. All the days of separation he shall not eat anything that is produced by the grapevine, from the seeds even to the skin. All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall pass over his head. He shall be holy until the days are fulfilled, for which he separated himself to the Lord, and he shall let the locks of his hair on his head grow long. And all the days of his separation to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead person." So most of these Nazarites, whenever they made this vow, it was for a short period of time, or a set period of time rather, and that they would follow these vows just for that piece. Samuel is one of two people that we look at in the Bible as being a lifelong Nazarite. Samson was the other one, although you can take a look at Samson and wonder if he was really a Nazarite or not based upon what happened as he continued in his life. But we can see with Samuel that there's these traits of being a Nazarite that continue throughout his life. And in Judges 13, 1 through 5, this is when God had spoken to Samuel's mother and said that this boy is going to be set aside. And we see the example of him being put forth as a Nazarite. And then in 1 Samuel 1:11, we get that as well. So we see this piece where Samuel has these Nazarite pieces in his life. Now, when we take a look at Saul, we never find that evidence of being a Nazarite, although he probably has some influence from Samuel on this, because if Samuel was a Nazarite, he's probably passing along pieces in holiness and scripture and understanding about what a Nazarite is and does. So Saul may have understood these parts. So there is some of that purity piece that goes along with being a Nazarite that Saul probably understood, but we don't see that in scripture with him. We definitely see it with Samuel. All right, so let's move in then to God's visible presence. And we get examples of this. So this is the third part. Whenever we take a look at these people who are leaders of Israel, there are three different pieces that go in to knowing a person as a leader. And so the third part that we see is God's visible presence with them. And we can take this from beginning in Exodus, when we see that with the Ark of the Covenant, that there was smoke by day and fire by night. We see that in Exodus 13. We're going to see a similar passage to that in Numbers. So if you're still in Numbers, you can go ahead and move over to verse 22. And it tells us here that, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Thus you shall bless the sons of Israel. You shall say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you a peace." All right, so these people are going to definitely be known as having God in their presence. You're going to see God's presence upon these people. So we can carry that forward with some of these other leaders in Israel. whether the presence is with him or not. Go ahead and go over to chapter 9, verses 15 through 18. And this is a similar passage to Exodus 13. And it tells us, now on the day that the tabernacle was erected, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony, and in the evening it was like the appearance of fire over the tabernacle until morning. So it was continuously the cloud would cover it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And when the cloud was lifted from over the tent, afterward the sons of Israel would set them out. And in the place where the cloud was settled down, there the sons of Israel would camp. And at the command of the Lord, the sons of Israel would set out, and at the command of the Lord they would camp. As long as the cloud settled over the tabernacle, they remained camped. And so we see the presence of the Lord within the Ark of the Covenant right here, and we see that continuing on through the rest of that chapter. So we see God's presence even from that time. Yes? Okay. So then we're going to take a look and see does that apply with Samuel and with Saul. So let's go back then over to Samuel, 1 Samuel. And we're not going to read these passages. We've looked at these already. But we see in 1 Samuel 3, this is whenever Samuel is in the temple, and God calls out to him 3 different times, and Samuel is asking, who is this? But we see that God is speaking to Samuel. And so if we see God speaking to him, that tells us that God's presence is with him. There are numerous times, if you go, and these are 4 different verses, where Samuel prays or calls to the Lord. So often we see that Samuel is calling out to God, and God is answering him. And so Samuel is following what God wants, whether it is with Saul in leadership, or whether Samuel's in leadership, or whether it's getting ready for David to be in leadership. We continually see Saul praying or calling to the Lord. Okay? So we can definitely see God's visible presence within Samuel. So then that takes us to Saul. All right. So these are some verses that we've looked at. I want to go back and take just a quick peek at them. If you go to 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 6. And so it tells us that the Spirit of the Lord will come upon him, will come upon you mightily, talking about Saul right here, and you shall prophesy with them and be changed into another man. And then skipping down to verse 9, and then it happened, when he turned his back to leave Samuel, God changed his heart, and all those signs came about on that day. And when they came to the hill there, behold, a group of prophets met him, and the Spirit of God came upon him mightily, so that he prophesied among them. All right. And then to verse 11, or chapter 11, verse 6. And we see this happen again. The Spirit of God came upon Saul mightily when he heard these words, and he became very angry. So we see God's presence coming into Saul's life whenever Saul was in favor with God. Whenever Saul was following God as he should, we can see these different actions taking place. But whenever Saul decided to just do things on his own and not kill everybody like he was supposed to, and then whenever we see that whenever Saul decided to act like a priest, whenever he wasn't a priest, God said, that's it. That's it. And we don't see his presence with him as we had seen before.
I think Uzziah did the same thing, kind of did some priestly stuff, and he had leprosy.
Say it again now.
King Uzziah.
Yes. And what about him?
And he had leprosy. The priest tried to stop him, and he got angry with the priest.
Okay. So whenever he was acting out of favor, is what you're saying. Gotcha.
You don't tell me what I'm supposed to do.
All right. So then we see what happens to Saul because he is out of favor. And if we turn to chapter 16, verse 23. Let's start with verse 21. So David, has come into Saul's life by this time. And he says, then David came to Saul and attended him, and Saul loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, let David now stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. And so it came about when the evil spirit from God came to Saul, David would take the harp and play it with his hand, and Saul would be refreshed and be well, and the evil spirit would depart from him. So now we see that God is allowing this spirit to be able to come over Saul. We didn't see that before, but it happens right here in chapter 16. And if we go over to chapter 18, verse 10, we see it happen again. And it tells us, now it came about on the next day that an evil spirit from God came mightily upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house. And while David was playing the harp with his hand, as usual, and a spear was in Saul's hand. And then Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped from his presence twice. All right, so again, we see that evil spirit come upon Saul whenever he's out of God's presence. So we're certainly going to know, as we look at these kings, that whether they're in the presence of God or they're not in the presence of God. And we'll see that even more evidently when we get to David next year and Solomon the year after that. So any thoughts on this last part with God's visible presence? Jared?
I think it's kind of interesting that God allowed the evil spirit to come to Saul, but then also God allowed Saul grace in giving him David to play the harp to, relieve him from that spirit,
Yep.
essentially. So you see God's, acting on both sides of it and giving him grace as well.
Yes, without a doubt. And we're gonna talk about grace more either next week or the week after, and we'll see that part with this passage too. Yep. All right. Anything else? All right. I'll ask you to be in prayer for me on this week. On Thursday, I turned 50 in December. And so you get a special, take a look at when you're 50, and that happens for me on Thursday. So just a prayer that things go well that day. So, all right. Thanks for your time this morning.